All right, in 5.9a, we are going to talk about solving systems of equations using substitution. So in 5.8, we used graphing to solve our equations, and in these examples, we're going to use substitution. So the steps that we follow to use substitution, step number 1 is to determine which equation is solved in terms of either x or y. So we're going to look for a variable with a coefficient of 1. Then we're going to substitute for that variable into the other equation and solve. Step number 3 is to substitute the value of the variable back into the first equation above, and then we finally write our solution as an ordered pair in step number 4. So this will be easier to explain using some examples. If you look at number 1, first step, determine which equation is solved in terms of x or y. We have y equals 6 right here. We're going to take that y equals 6. This is already solved for a variable. And on the other side, we're going to substitute it in to my other equation, x plus y equals 3. So now I can take that y equals 6, and instead of having a y over here, I'm going to plug in 6. Now I can solve this equation to give me x, so I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. X equals -3. Now my final step, I have my x equals -3 and I have my y equals 6. I'm going to write my answer as an ordered pair. So remember, x goes first, then y, so we have -3, 6. Okay, so next let's look at number 2. Our first step is to get one variable by itself, and we have that already with x equals y plus 6. Here my x is by itself, so I'm going to take that y plus 6 and substitute it in for my x in my other equation. If I have x plus y equals 1, I'm going to take that y plus 6 and replace it with my x. So when I do that, I get y plus 6, so that goes in place of my x. Then I still have plus y equals 1. Now I can combine like terms and solve. Y plus y gives me 2y plus 6 equals 1. Minus 6 on both sides, I get 2y equals -5. My last step is to divide both sides by 2. Y equals -5/2. Then my final answer, I can plug it into my ordered pair. My x is going to go first. So in order to figure out what my x is, I need to take my y and plug it back in to get my x value. So to do that, I'm going to have x is equal to, now y is -5/2 plus 6. And that gives me 7/2. Okay, now I can write my ordered pair. X is 7/2, y is -5/2. Okay. Number 3, solve and sub. We're having my two sides of the equation. Solved by itself, we already have x equals 2, and that means my other equation is going to be what I substitute. I'm going to take that 2 and plug it in for x. When I do that, I have 2 times x, so that becomes 2 times 2 minus 3y equals 5. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 3y equals 5. I want to move that 4 to the other side. And then finally divide by a -3. I get y is equal to negative 1/3. So my final answer here, my ordered pair, is going to be my x value, which is 2, comma my y value. Okay, let's do number 4. We have our solve and substitution. Okay, let's see. Our second equation is solved for y, so let's write that one on our solve side. Sorry, that should be a 3. 3x minus 3. And then my other equation is what I will substitute in to. Okay, if this is what y equals 3x minus 3, I'm going to take that whole thing and plug it in right here. So now I'm going to write 5x plus 3x minus 3 equals 1. 5x plus 3x gives me 8x minus 3 equals 1. To solve for x, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Last step is to divide both sides by 8. I get x is equal to 1/2. Now I can take that x and I'm going to plug it back in up here to figure out what my y equals. When I do that, I get y equals 3 times 1/2 minus 3. 3 times 1/2 is 1.5, minus 3 is negative 1.5, or negative 3/2. Either way, you can write it as a fraction or a decimal. That makes our final answer here. My x value is 1/2. My y value is negative 3/2. That is my solution to these two equations.